it was at least 4 years ago was our last one. We got one and it was bogus, right? It was just a bogus freight guard, which is kind of why we're talking here. And, I didn't understand. That was my first, experience where like booking freight was a lot more annoying after we got that freight guard, right? We got a bogus freight guard, and then everyone's life at my company was slightly more annoying after that point, right? Like I said, we have a bunch of owner operators that are self-dispatched, so one of them picks up the phone to book something, and then they're answering these weird questions about shit that they don't know about. They're like, "Yo, what's up with this freight guard?" They're getting asked that, and they don't know the answer. They're just, somebody got it, and it's not them. They don't know. And so now they're hitting me up. It's like, "Yo, who got a freight guard?" Now they're pissed at me. It's like, "Who's doing that?" I was like, now I have to try to explain myself to them. It's like, "Oh, it was bogus." Like, no one got it,
Welcome back to the ThinkFreight Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Thomas Werdine. I'm excited to have a group of gentlemen, a panel, if you will. We've got Cale, we've got Jason, and we have Dan. We've got a roundtable regarding freight guards, how and when they should be used. Guys, welcome to the pod. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Thomas.
No, for sure, guys. I appreciate all three of you. I think this will be a pretty fun conversation. Freight guards are such an interesting topic right now, and they have been for probably the last 3 years, with how the industry has kind of shifted towards this online model of reviewing both carriers and brokers, and more so on, I think, the carrier side, where carriers are being the most affected. So I kind of want to have this convo. We've got three great guys here. I want you all to kind of introduce yourself. Jason, why don't you go ahead? Why don't you start first? Kind of give us a quick intro, who you are, kind of what you're doing in the industry, and then we'll kick it off to Dan and then to Cale.
Dude, I'm just a motor carrier, man. Just a trucking company. Just as normal. We're trucking anything that fits in a dry van. So I would say as average as possible. Like when you're thinking trucking company, this is what it is. I'm just one of those.
That's cool, man. How many trucks are you guys running?
Right now, 18, I think. Less than 20.
Yeah. Are you guys doing all 48 states, or you guys do a little bit more regional stuff?
They could if they wanted, man. It's a lot of owner operators, and it's what's it called, man, like a book your own freight kind of model, right? So We're giving them the tools to operate, and they can just do whatever they want. Turns out you give people the tools to do what they want, and they don't want to go that far, So they're going, like, I would say, out and back. You go somewhere and you do your 10-hour reset, and then you come back, or you just stay local. A lot of the guys just run local, man. Because currently, this shit ain't worth it. The money's not there, dude, to like be out over the road. So it's like you might as well stay local. And so no, not really running all 48 states, man. Really, most of our guys are out of Charlotte, North Carolina, and so we're staying within like a 500-mile radius. You'll go to like Pennsylvania and back, or like Cincinnati and back, Florida, right, and back. So yeah, that's most of it, man. Just 18 trucks, either running local or running like regional.
No, that's cool. That stuff's always hyper needed. I know I used to move a lot of stuff out of North Carolina, a lot of plastic stuff going up to New York, going to Pennsylvania, going a little bit further south to Georgia and stuff like that, just like you said. So, the carriers like you guys are indispensable for kind of what we're doing, and as past freight broker for what I used to do. So yeah, man. No, that's you say you're just a carrier. No, that's awesome, man. Guys,
well, thanks.
We couldn't do our jobs without you, man. So, Dan, what are you guys? What are you doing? What's Artaev Law doing?
Hey, Thomas. So, yeah, my name is Dan Artaev. I'm the founder and managing partner of Artaev at Law. We're a Metro Detroit law firm. So, back to the cold Midwest. That's us. Yeah. And so when I started my own law firm back in 2020, I've been a lawyer for about 14 years, worked in government, worked in private practice, started my own law firm in 2020. One of the focal areas that was interesting to me is anything internet related. And early on, I wrote an article that about online reputation and online reviews that happened to be about a litigation case involving a carrier and a broker fighting over a freight guard. And so it kind of was interesting that after I wrote that article, I shot up to the top of the Google rankings organically when somebody Googled carrier 411 lawsuit, and sort of just got into it, helping out a lot of carriers from all over the place with resolving freight guard disputes, advocating on their behalf. And out of that, it sort of just grew, and my reputation evolved online as a guy who understands this space. And so I've been doing more and more transportation law, and that's a big part of what we do at Artaev Law right now.
No, that's fantastic. And then you've recently started Carrier Defender, which we'll dive into a little bit more here shortly.
Yes.
Well, go ahead.
Yes, we're partnering with Carrier Defender. We're their legal backing. And Carrier Defender is a company that's specifically focused on an economical and practical solution for carriers, especially the smaller owner operators, who are looking to protect their reputation and resolve freight guards without the expense and time consumption and just the whole headache of retaining a full-on lawyer and going through litigation, which is not always the best route. And, when a lawyer tells you that, you really know it's the truth.
No, for sure. Cale, why don't you dive into who you are, kind of what you're doing? You've got kind of a unique background as well. You've come from the shipper side, the carrier side, and now the broker side. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yep, appreciate that. So Cale Pearson, I run B2B transportation. We're located in Medford, Oregon. Been in business since 2004 and primarily agent-based, about a 80-20 split as far as agents and then an in-house revenue. Previous to that, right out of college, went to work for a manufacturer running their shipping and traffic down in California. And it's GAF roughly now, it was L Corporation at the time, and started to get to know some carriers and newly married, wanted to move out of where we were and found a carrier that was in Oregon and really enjoyed it and liked it. So my wife and I moved up to Oregon in 2003, and I was 13 years in the asset game, flatbed. Started as dispatch, worked my way up to president and shareholder. And then we ended up selling that to the Dasky organization in 2013, and I stayed on for about 3 more years. And now I run B2B transportation. So been a little bit of everything.
No, that's awesome. And you guys have a really awesome and combined experience, which is why I want to have you guys on, because Jason's the motor carrier who's currently doing it. And Jason, if I remember correctly from our previous conversation, you've had freight guards and you currently have a freight guard. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I've had 2 total. We've been in business for like 8 years, and we've had 2 freight guards in those 8 years. But it was honestly, man, I should have looked it up before I came on here, because I can't remember how long ago they even were, man. It was probably like 4 years ago. It was at least 4 years ago was our last one. We got one, and it was bogus, right? It was just a bogus freight guard, which is kind of why we're talking here. And I didn't understand. That was my first experience where like booking freight was a lot more annoying after we got that freight guard, right? We got a bogus freight guard, and then everyone's life at my company was slightly more annoying after that point, right? Like I said, we have a bunch of owner operators that are self-dispatch. So one of them picks up the phone to book something, and, then they're answering these weird questions about shit that they don't know about. They're like, yo, what's up with this freight guard? They're getting asked that, and they don't know the answer. They're just, somebody got it, and it's not them. They don't know. And so now they're hitting me up. It's like, yo, who got a freight guard? Now they're pissed at me. It's like, who's doing that? I was like, now to try to explain myself to them. It's like, oh, it was bogus. Like, no one got it, And, and then we got another one that was completely legit, man. Just you get a lot of autonomy at Downey Shipping, right? And, so the guy just did something that he shouldn't have and got a freight guard. And all I did was apologize in the response to the freight guard. I was like, yo, it's totally 100% our fault. It's not going to happen again. Driver's been coached. And he didn't, I love this man, but he didn't last that much longer after that.
No. And that's, that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, Jason, because you have that lived experience of having dealt with, both a bogus freight guard, but also one from the, kind of the real standpoint where you kind of realize, hey, this is our mess up. And Cale, I want to have you on because, you're on the broker side. You've had to issue some of these freight guards. even though I know you tend to not like to do that, especially steer away from it if you can. But you have had to lease them in the past, and then we also have Dan who's helping fight some of these fake freight guards that are being left, because this is a massive issue. We're seeing a lot on LinkedIn, a lot online of carriers being really affected by these freight guards, whether they are real or legitimate. And if they're real, obviously, those are just kind of issues they have to work through. But these fake ones are being left in such a way where it can be very damaging to a carrier's entire operations, when it's not just something like, hey, our driver got upset and whatever it may be. Some of these freight guards are pretty egregious. So why don't we dive into first, Dan, why don't you tell us kind of what a freight guard is, how they're being maybe used in the industry, especially lately, to kind of maybe target carriers unfairly.
Yeah, sure. And when we talk about freight guards, we're talking about the specific review on the Carrier 411 website, but really the concept applies to reviews left anywhere, where it's Google reviews or DAT. But freight guards are particularly egregious and particularly impactful because a lot of broker companies, they go to Carrier 411. And if in a lot of cases, if a carrier even has a freight guard, some companies just won't use at all without even reading the response. And that's extremely damaging, especially to smaller carriers with smaller books of business, smaller client base. And so and when Thomas, you talk about bogus freight guards and fake freight guards, we're really talking about a broker going out there on Carrier 411 and just posting stuff that's absolutely not true. And that's where the legal problem really comes in, because there's not going to be liability or any sort of cause of action for a broker who goes online and posts something that's true and verifiably true. Right. The problem comes along when there's some sort of misunderstanding or assumptions, maybe a conclusion that somebody's doing something nefarious when they're really not, or just something completely bizarre. And I'll be happy to give an example of some really bizarre stuff that I've seen later on. But at the end of the day, yeah, what I try to do from the legal perspective is really focus on these freight guards or reviews that are false and out there damaging a carrier's ability to do business.
Yeah, no, that I appreciate that breakdown. And I want to go back to Jason real quick, because, you have had those multiple freight guards, one being completely fictitious, one being, something that your driver had to work on. How do those freight guards, you said they're now several years old. How do those affect, kind of your reputation, both in the short term and in the long term?
In the long term, no. In the long term, it hasn't. No, okay. No. There is no effect. Now, the effect lasted like longer than it should have. It's probably like 6 months. It's like 6 months worth of the same question, right? What's up with this freight guard, right? Like you call on a load. What's up with this freight guard? It's like, it's 2 questions. You call on the load. What's your MC number? You tell them. What's up with this freight guard? That's the very next question, right? For about 6 months. And it's not even me. It's just, I'm not booking that much freight, man. It's the owner operators that work here, right? So each one of them, it's like really, man, it's just annoying.
Yeah, it makes their life a lot harder because, like you said, they're not the ones who got the freight guard. It's someone else. So essentially, they all kind of have to be more careful when they're operating to make sure that they're not affecting other people's business at the same time.
I was thinking about it, man. Like in terms of that particular business model, you're all eating off the same plate. So it's really important that one person. Well, it's really important that everybody acts right, right? And I was thinking about that in this particular business model, but then I was thinking like it doesn't even. It's kind of any business model at all, dude. Because if you're a 30 truck carrier and they're all employee drivers and one person fucks up, then maybe you got like 5 dispatchers and now they're all answering that question every day, right? What's up with this freight guard? And they're affecting the money of the company, which is affecting the money of all the other, essentially your coworkers, right? So whether it's like a self-dispatch model or it's just any model, it just seems to like, when I started thinking about it, I was like, man, it doesn't actually matter how you're doing business as a trucking company, the freight guard's just going to make, it's going to make life worse for you. You know, it affects your like livelihood for people that had nothing to do with it. It's really strange. If one employee makes it, just fucks up, it's not just them that are affected. It's all their coworkers, potentially money, you know, and you can't fuck with other people's money, you know, like you can't. Sorry, man, I forgot. I'm probably not supposed to swear.
No, you're all good. Anything can be bleeped if we want to. And honestly, this
Okay,
is,
sweet.
while it's a family friendly show, it is trucking. It is logistics, right?
Yeah, my bad, dude. I won't. Yeah, if we can edit
You're
that,
good.
dude, that's
No,
all right.
you're good. Genuinely, you're all good. Go. I like it when you shoot from the hip. Just keep going. If we need to edit stuff, we'll edit stuff. We'll worry about that later.
And let me say this, Jason, you are lucky that you have brokers even asking what's up with this freight guard, because I've had clients come to me that say, nobody will even do business with me. They don't even let me explain. They see the freight guard, I'm automatically on their DNU.
It's like a lot of the things, dude, the experience of being a motor carrier is that like a lot of the punishment doesn't fit the crime, right? In a lot of ways, man. If you get, you could get like a couple of dings, man. You could get a couple of really minor hours of service violations, when you get pulled in somewhere, minor ones, you're missing your trailer number on the shipping document or, whatever, the form and manner. You get a couple of those, dude. It causes your hours of service percentage to go up beyond whatever threshold the broker is using in their safety software that they don't even understand. And that's it, bro. You got a couple of minor things and they kick you off, and they don't even know what they're looking at. You are trying to book a load. What's your MC number? They type it in and then you're red flagged and they don't know why. I know why, right? But you can try to explain it. They don't care. It's like, no, I can't use you. Carriers are a dime a dozen, right? The punishment doesn't fit the crime when it comes to that stuff. And same thing with the freight guard. It's like, this could potentially be a minor thing. And now I can't work with maybe dozens of companies and they don't even know why and they don't care,
No,
yeah,
for sure. Kale, I want to ask you because I think that this is interesting and Dan kind of led into it, but being on the broker side, what are kind of some of those implications for you guys on the broker side when you do see a freight guard? How is that trust in that relationship when you see, a new carrier that's trying to book a, potentially, load for a bigger customer and you're saying, hey, like maybe we shouldn't be booking this and got freight guards, how do you guys kind of evaluate that from your perspective?
What we do is we actually read the freight guard first and foremost. Is it legit? Because there are a lot of people out there that, to use Jason's words, the punishment doesn't fit the crime, and they're the judge and jury and everything. So we'll read the freight guard. How old is it? Do they own it? Like if I call Jason, he says, "Hey, my driver screwed up. This is what happened. We coached him. We move on." But a lot of people, that are booking the freight, they don't have that authority. They just know their company policy is X, Y, Z. And if you have a freight guard, we can't use you. And I remember being a carrier, we didn't use a lot of brokers, but I remember some brokers would be like, "Oh yeah, we can't use you because of this." And you'd be like, "What? I mean, we're like a great company." Well, you had a late shipment. Well, have you ever ran a truck? They do break down, So we use common sense. Another thing I do is I get all those notifications with an agent-based program. We have to really manage the agent relationship, the customer relationship, and the carrier relationship. And it's often those freight guards for some people are an emotional decision. And it doesn't need to be. That's to me where it's like, if it's emotional, we're going to pull it down and we're going to talk to the person that posted it and say, listen, if it's not factual and we can't back it up with documentation, it didn't happen. Because if it gets to the point where it hits Dan's desk and Dan reaches out to me and I can't prove it happened, I'm the problem at that point. So it's really just trying to use it as a tool, but people use it as a weapon, unfortunately. And I'm sure we'll get into it of how people are leveraging it to, get money out of people, or we've been offered money to pull them down when they're legitimate shady people. And it's like, hey, you intentionally double brokered our load, or you did this, or you didn't, no call, no show with a crane appointment. We got a $5,000 hook now. So, those are times when, it's necessary. And that's what I hope, is that other brokers use it well, and don't just post it because it was an emotional and they're mad that day.
No, I think that's a good point, because I want to dive into a little bit more, maybe like brokerage policy considerations for posting freight cards, right? Because I remember when we were at TQL, we couldn't personally leave any freight cards. We could leave any internal note in
Yep.
our TMS that we wanted to, but we could not leave any kind of freight card. That was always up to upper management, always up to their teams to handle. But when I started and started helping scale FSL, we kind of had policies around what we would do and how we'd handle these things, because we didn't want anything to kind of go awry. And I've heard of other brokerages kind of starting similar things where they're saying, hey, we're going to have like a 72-hour cool off period before any kind of freight cards are posted. We have to make sure we have all of our I's crossed, T's crossed, to make sure that this isn't going to land on someone like Dan's desk to where we're gonna open ourselves up to a can of worms for a libel lawsuit or something down the line there. So let me ask you this. I mean, what do you think, Kale, from that kind of perspective? Should there become some kind of like cooling off period? What should brokers do when they're kind of assessing whether they should be posting these freight cards? And also, like, what are some of the maybe situations where they should be used? I mean, obviously, if you're just wait for a shipment for an appointment, I mean, there's no reason to have a freight card. You can leave an internal note saying, hey, they've been late on a couple shipments, but like to leave a freight card, that's just absolutely asinine. So what do you think about there?
Yeah. For us, I always say cooler heads do prevail. So it's like, don't just post it. Like, let's just say I gave Jason a load and whatever happened, and he calls me, and I immediately, before I even redispatch the load, I go post it, right? Because I'm in an emotional state. Don't do that. Let it cool off. I do like the cooling off period. I've always said I sleep on things. 24 hours. Let me come back with a new thought process. I'm not charged up about it, or the agent's not charged up, or the employee, whoever it is, and sit on it and sleep on it. And then if it still warrants it, okay, go ahead and post it. The things for me where we would post it is a clear back solicitation, right? You give it, and they just immediately try to go around you. That for sure is going to get it every time. If it's sometimes no call, no shows are tough. I could go either way on some of those. If the customer is a first come, first serve, and you have a window to get it, and it's no harm, no foul, you leave an internal note, you move on. But we do a lot of big stuff that requires cranes and riggers, and there's serious charges. And if it's a no call, no show on that, because now we're on the hook. And $5,000 is pretty easy for a lot of those cranes and riggers on a big job. So if it's a no call, no show on those, we've clearly shared with them, listen, if there's any issue, you just have to communicate and let us know so that we can adjust. But if it's a no call, no show, now we're on the hook. We're going to report that one. But if it's, like I said before, trucks break down. I used to tell people that all the time when I was on the asset base side. So, listen, we're dealing with people and equipment, and sometimes failures happen. And all we can do is try to communicate about those issues when they do arise. The minute you share. And then if they're a good customer, they're going to understand that. The time that where I see that I'll pull them down is the agent or the employee says they didn't take the load, or they were late. It was like it's just an emotional decision. It's like, you don't need to do that. So I'll call the agent, let them cool off, and then be like, hey, I got to pull that down, because I think about it similar to like if somebody files on our bond, right, for whatever reason, if I can't document it and show, and that when it's provable, it's undeniable what happened, if I don't have that documentation, I'm not going to put a freight guard report. So it's the same mindset for me on that.
Jason, what do you think? I mean, you're today the current motor carrier. What instances do you think warrant a freight guard, or would you say, yeah, damn, that's on us. I understand why it's being left. something like that.
That's a good question, man. What does warrant a freight guard? Anything that it seems like anything that like seriously damages the relationship that you had with the broker has with their customer, right? Like if you're, like I said, man, if you're messing with other people's money, right? Like if you're messing with the broker's money at that point, right? Like you did something, you communicated one thing and it was a lie, right?
Yeah.
And then that lie causes your whatever customer, the broker's the customer at that point, to lose money, right? You're lying, someone else is losing money. I think it could be even that broad, you know, something if everything's clearly communicated, even if it's like a huge mess up, like, you know, it could be a catastrophe, but everything was communicated the whole time, right? It's like, so in that situation, maybe you do cause the broker to lose money or lose the customer, but everything was communicated. Disasters happen, right? You're like on the way to a pickup and catastrophic disaster, and now you can't make it and everybody's out money. But it's like, dude, that's just part of it, right? It's not like you're in a good situation at that point either as a carrier, right? So I don't know, man. Specific situations, I'm not sure, but I would say lack of communication that causes money lost, right? Or would you say like reputational damage, maybe? But I would definitely lean on like the money. If it's messing up somebody's money, dude, then I'm cool. You know, then I would feel okay. Like if I was a broker, I'm like, dude, these people, you know, this lack of communication just cost me $2,500. I'm gonna freight guard it, you know. And well, and even then, man, it's like, I guess, you know what, thinking about it even further, I'm not sure, because a little, like if something costs you, you know, a lack of communication costs you $2,500, now you freight guard this carrier. How much does that cost that carrier, right? Maybe it's like uneven here. It costs the broker this $2,500. It's going to cost that carrier, you know, dozens of potential, like, you know, so much extra work, right? Maybe you can't work with like a couple dozen different brokers, and now you're making like 5 times the amount of phone calls that it would take to get the loads that aren't as good, that don't fit your company. So, dude, you know what? I don't have a good answer. I don't know what specific situations. That is pretty tough.
Yeah, I think it is tough to kind of maybe broadly give or just kind of like off the top examples, right? I mean, I'll give you one example where we had to freight guard a carrier that I think it was fully warranted, and maybe you guys can chime in. We had a carrier who was running a produce load, truckload of blueberries coming up from the border, was going up to Illinois to deliver at a Fresh Time facility, I believe. And he gets to the facility. No issues. Reefer's running continuous. No issues here until he gets to the receiver. He gets to the receiver. His appointment is 7 a.m. He gets to the receiver, and at 6:30, he opens his back doors and starts waiting. So you know, he didn't turn off his reefer, but the product is sitting there with his doors open for 30 minutes. This is July. It's 4th of July produce. I mean, it's stuff coming in. This is like the 1st of July. So it's stuff that's, you know, going in for ads for the 4th of July. And when he got there, I mean, when the receiver came out, he was like, "Hey, why are your doors open? We haven't assigned you a door yet." And by the time, like, the produce wasn't bad, but they rejected the whole load because of quality control issues, because they couldn't verify how long his doors had actually been open. Had they been 30 minutes, or did he get there at 6 hours earlier and open his doors then? He was right out of view, out of the cameras on the facility. He did not have a camera on the trailer. We could tell by the reefer temp download that he opened the doors probably an hour before his delivery appointment. So 6 a.m. No idea why he opened his trailers. It was a sealed trailer. He should not have opened them until they were ready. But we had to freight guard him for that because they rejected the entire load, and then they didn't want to take any responsibility. It was our fault. It was the receiver's fault. It was everyone else's fault. And I didn't ultimately want to, because it was such a weird situation, but ultimately we had to freight guard him because it was just like, hey, this could cause other issues with other shippers. It's a potential health issue. That's a situation where I didn't want to, but yeah, we ultimately came into with the shipper, with the receiver, with all management team, and said, yeah, we're going to have to freight guard this carrier. What do you guys think, Jason? Was that fair? Dan, do you think that's fair? Kale, what do you guys think? We'll go to Jason and then Kale and then Dan.
Fair.
Yeah.
That's yeah. I don't know, man. I don't use I stopped using the word fair a few years ago. I don't know if that's fair or not, dude. It's like the driver made a mistake, right? And
Yeah.
it's like to us, this is all super obvious. You don't cut the seal. You know what I mean? You got to reefer run continuous. Like you don't open those doors. It's obvious to, motor carriers. It's obvious how long, how much experience this driver had. He made a mistake, dude. Cost his company how much money, right? I mean, it's at least a huge cargo claim, which sucks. And, deductible, maybe it's not that bad, but it's insurance rates go up, right? Deductibles got to get paid. You got to figure out what to do with that freight. That's going to cost money. And then it's going to cost days worth of work. And then you're going to get a freight guard, and that's going to cost you how much even more. So like you're paying for it. You're just paying for it, man, in so many different ways. And then you get a freight guard, Yeah. So like, is that fair, dude? I don't know, bro. Dude, I want to hear, dude. I definitely don't know, dude. I want to hear what you guys think, though.
Yeah, I think for me, is how did the situation play out with the customer? Are they a good carrier? Do you have a relationship with them? And then on the backside of that claim, how did they deal with it? Because if they just dug their heels in like it wasn't their fault, that to me is a bigger red flag. Because
who wasn't whose fault? Sorry.
So let's say like obviously the driver opened the doors, right? And it got exposed and the load was rejected. But now that you have that situation, how is it handled from that point forward? Did the carrier, hey, we made a mistake, let's work through this, we're going to own it. And,
right.
You probably just have to dump it because it's food, right? So you probably just have to find a place to dump it. Did they take care of that process? If they were good on the backside of it and we can salvage, you're saying no, they weren't. So then if they weren't, it's definitely a freight guard. But,
right.
A little more context. So they were very difficult to get them to dump the load. It did have to be dumped. It was very difficult to get them to do that. It was extreme. Like the guy was like, I'll just dump it here in the parking lot. Like,
right.
So that's how it started. And then it was like, he finally found a location that he could dump it. After that, when we were working on the claim, it was, this isn't our driver's fault. You're unfairly claiming us. So I'm like, how are we unfairly? Your driver cut the seal. Like he opened the doors and over an hour before the appointment time. We had no relationship. This was a first time carrier, unfortunately. Our carrier vetting was pretty spot on at the time. There was really no red flags. They weren't a conditional carrier. They had really good safety ratings. So we really didn't see any red flags. The driver was very responsive, gave us all their numbers, after hours context. So we really didn't feel like at the beginning of the load, we didn't have any red flags at all. And then, I think it's just a driver issue. I think maybe the driver didn't understand. Maybe he wasn't a reefer driver. I couldn't tell you. It's just a very weird situation.
Yeah. So to expand on it, I think back to my days as a carrier, and we would have an issue with a driver, and a customer would call me and say, I don't want that driver in here ever again. And I would explain to him, like, listen, the driver made a mistake. He's been here a year, 2 years, whatever the time frame is. Let us coach him and manage him. I said, because, we're running 300 plus trucks. For us to manage who can go into what location and why, I said, for us, that was if they were legitimately kicked out of a facility, we often parted ways with them. We tried not to, but if we couldn't work through it because, we felt we were pretty convincing with the customer and we let it cool off, and then we revisited a week later and say, hey, I know it was a mistake. We owned it, whatever it was. We paid the claim. That's how we settled it. Is the driver okay to come back in? And they go, yeah, okay. So we worked through that. But if you don't work through it, that's the problem to me. And so often I have found that you actually strengthen your relationships with your carriers and your customers when there is a mistake if you handle it correctly. But it sounds like in that situation, that carrier, just dug their heels in. And so I'm with you. I would have filed the freight guard, having all that information.
What do you think, Dan? If that carrier had come to you and said, hey, this is a fictitious freight guard, help us get it removed, what would you kind of say?
Well, before I get into that, I just wanted to say that if every broker handled freight guards with the care and precision like Cale, I would not have a transportation law department. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very professional and profound approach, recognizing the impact and the disproportional impact that a freight guard can often have on a carrier, especially the smaller mom and pop operations. But again, getting back to the specific fact pattern, from a legal perspective, the first thing that I do is I ask for the copy of the freight guard, and I would ask this carrier to identify exactly what was false. And if they just tell me, oh, I don't think it's fair, or it wasn't my fault, or something like that, I would say, okay, well, if it wasn't your fault, where's the documentation that's saying it's somebody else's fault? It has to be documented because, again, the law doesn't punish truth. The law punishes false statements made maliciously to damage people. Whether that statement is intentionally made or with gross negligence, there's some room there, but at the end of the day, it has to be a false statement. So if it depends on what the freight guard said. If the freight guard in this instance said exactly what you guys described, the driver came in, opened the doors for some reason, load went bad, was rejected. Okay, I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you from a legal perspective. If the freight guard was out there, that's what happened. But the freight guard took some liberties and said, "Oh, this guy's a double broker, and he did all this other stuff that's not verified." Then I'd probably get involved and do my best to try to get this thing resolved for the carrier. But at the end of the day, it really depends on, is this truthful? Is this substantiated by documents? Is this fact? If so, there's not anybody can do about it from a legal perspective, and no lawyer would be that has any sort of legitimate operation would even entertain a case like that.
How often do you think that some of these, looking at it, Dan, from the law perspective, how often are you guys maybe more arbitrating or just kind of helping either remove a negative freight guard or just help the language of a freight guard so that it's actually depicting what happened in a situation instead of, like you said, maybe it was a little bit exaggerated in that instance? How often are those happening versus having to actually go to court and fight a freight guard?
Yeah, that's actually step one. And I did mediator training. I'm a trained mediator. I served on some mediation panels and have participated, been appointed by courts before. So I know the value of mediation is tremendous, especially given that lawsuits cost a lot of money, are very slow and unpredictable. So actually, the very first thing that I always try to do when faced with a carrier and a freight guard is just call up the broker, find out what the issue was, find out if there's something that can be done to address this particular issue. Is there a solution where everybody can win? Because at the end of the day, that's going to be always, if you can find a mediated or negotiated resolution, that freight guard goes down, the carrier's trucks are up and running again, and maybe in that situation, the broker can also be made whole in some way. So that's always step one. That's always going to be step one from my perspective.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and trying to kind of just mediate that, like you said, it's very expensive to take these out and draw these out for long periods of time. What are maybe some of these? I know, Dan, you said you had a couple of examples. What are some of those like real life examples where freight guards would be used unfairly, and maybe how was it resolved? Like what lessons can maybe be learned from a situation like that?
Well, I think they really there's really very diverse situations.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of freight guards that I've helped resolve actually because there was a miscommunication, like a legitimate misunderstanding between the carrier and the broker. And one of the things I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if Jason or Cale, you guys have dealt with this, is a lot of times carriers, especially smaller ones, English is not their native language, and there's sometimes miscommunication, misunderstanding, and problems caused because of the miscommunication. And I've actually helped resolve a couple of disputes like that where it was just, the carrier just needed somebody representing them who spoke English well and could communicate the issues with the broker and provide the documentation in support, where the broker went, oh, okay, I understand what happened. Yes, the freight guard's not justified. Let me take that down and be on your way, carrier. So I've had situations like that. But I did want to highlight one particularly strange situation that came about. I was asked to consult a carrier out of California, and they were booked on a load in, I believe it was out in Alabama. They had a truck out there. It was convenient for them. I think there was a shipment dropped off. They were going to instead of doing Deadhead, they were going to pick up this pickle shipment in Alabama. Booked the load the night before. So the load was supposed to be picked up at 2 p.m. Eastern time. The broker's representative starts calling the driver at 6 a.m., I believe, Eastern time, and just repeatedly calling him. The driver was sleeping because of the federally mandated regulations that require driver rest. Didn't pick up the phone. 10 minutes later, the broker cancels the load on the text the driver, said, "You're off this load, you such and such, expletive. I have these text messages."
Wow.
Half an hour after the fact, the broker is calling the carrier representative in California, and due to the time difference, it's the middle of the night in California, the carrier's rep doesn't pick up. So broker puts up a freight guard saying that there was no truck in the area. This driver is not answering the phone. They defrauded me. Just completely made up stuff. Yeah. Then an hour later, another freight guard gets posted with the same kind of rhetoric. And then I think another hour or two later, another freight guard gets posted. So 3 freight guards, all before the shipment was even due to get picked up, and after the broker already canceled the load. The carrier in California is waking up, checking his phone. He has 3 freight guards. He's like, what is going on? This is complete nonsense. My driver is ready and able to go. He still has time to pick this up. So anyway, this was an extreme case. I think there was, I don't know, maybe the broker was just having a bad day. Maybe they were mentally unbalanced. I'm really not sure, but this case was also had to get escalated all the way to litigation, where I worked with local counsel in Virginia, where the broker was based, to secure a judgment against this broker for defamation and interference with the carrier's business. I think the amount that the judgment was down for was $450,000 for a just complete bizarre freight guard.
Wow. So what's the timeline from like the freight guard being filed to the judgment? Like, how is that, like 6 months, or is that like 2 weeks?
It was a little bit longer than 6 months, actually. It's a long process because we had to get local counsel on board. We also exhausted all our attempts at getting the freight guard down voluntarily, and I frankly am not sure why the owner never took it seriously enough to get it taken down. I'd say about 8 months we got to judgment.
And so that you think that's why the judgment was pretty high, because if let's say it got resolved in like 3 weeks, then the damages are less, right? Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, and also the judge was pretty pissed off at the broker for how they were just completely failing to acknowledge any responsibility and really not participating in the judicial process very well. Again, I'm not going to get into the details, but they pissed off a federal judge, and the federal judge awarded, and half of that amount was damages for compensation. Plus, there was like a $200,000 punitive damages award, which means the judge wanted to make an example out of this particular broker. So
right.
That is an extreme case, but it just really shows that freight guards can be very serious. And when they get to court, it's very unpredictable.
I've never seen that article. Like, that's like the story you just described. That's a good article, man. That really highlights the seriousness of it. Like, there's repercussions. Like, it highlights how serious it is to a carrier. Like, it's worth that much money. Like, you're fucking up that much of their money. That, like, it's actually worth going to court to try to get it back. And so, like, that's not I'm a freight nerd, so I'm always reading. And I've never seen anything like what you just described. Right? That's not out there. And I feel like that's like an important bit of information for just the general, the industry to be aware of. Like, I'm not aware of this, dude, and I feel like I'm pretty aware, of just, kind of what's going on.
It's an extreme example, Jason, and that's why I like talking about it, because it's really kind of like a wow, this is crazy. The broker is crazy. Luckily, the carrier in this case was an established company with about 20 years of experience, and some clients who really didn't care that they got 3 freight guards before noon on a particular day. But it was still damaging to them. There was still documented damages and lost business. And that's why the judge in that case compensated them to the tune of 6 figures.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely a valid judgment, I think, because they're using freight guards as a form of retaliation when a carrier did literally nothing wrong. He was just literally sleeping, and the West Coast carrier manager is asleep at 3:00 in the morning. What do you want him to do? I mean, it's just a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. I remember being at TQL, like, when we had to start, we start at 7:00 in the morning, especially on the weekends. And it could very well could have been an after hours person who didn't really even know the load and was just sitting here. I'm obviously no excuses for this whatsoever, but I'm just kind of thinking through like how this could even happen to where if a load's not picking up, I'm not panicking if a driver's not answering his phone until like 3 hours before, maybe not even 2 hours before, especially if he's getting unloaded in the city where they're picking up. I'm not getting concerned at all until 2 hours before. And if you're concerned 8 hours, a full work day before this guy's even supposed to pick up your load, you're worrying about the wrong things. You're micromanaging your loads instead of focusing on what's actually important. And that's just I think, Kale, and you may be able to touch on this, but you can kind of see that a lot with maybe some new customers or customers who are more maybe on that fence of, hey, like if you guys don't perform well on some shipments, like we're gonna drop you from these lanes. It can come down to some of those maybe aspects, but no matter what the instance is, you should never be that concerned about a load 8 hours in advance.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I mean, they weaponized the freight guard is what they did. So to me, that is just, and not only once, but 3 times, right? That is just crazy. So, and to Dan's point, that judge sent him a message. I mean, if you had like, I'm trying to think of an example where I would need to know like 8 hours in advance. And it's like, it's an extreme example. I mean, maybe if you had like a big job and you had like 10 loads picking up, and you were kind of like making sure, and maybe you had a rigger there all day long, and it all had to like pick up same day and then move. Maybe you were 8 hours just double checking, but even then, with that time distance or that time change, just do the math, man. The guy's sleeping. And if you talked to him the night before, you knew he was close by. And I'd be like, hey, he was empty the night before. He's taking a nap. He's going to be arrested. Let's go. Move on.
Yeah, exactly.
But sometimes, and it got me thinking as you guys were talking is one of the things that happens in this industry is the lack of training and education of the other person's job and what their responsibilities are. Yes. And what's right and what's wrong. And if you're not educating your team, I mean, I'm always trying to talk about the carrier side or the customer side, because if that person on my team doesn't have that experience, that's my job to educate them. And, sometimes it's a black and white policy, but that's why I hate like hard, fast rules, because to me, there's always an exception to a rule. And it's, educating people to like listen, observe, and respond accordingly. Don't just, hey, you're going to be late and it's freight guard and we're moving on and screw you and I don't ever want to see you again. Because think about it, if you're on that side of that, that's not fair. And going back to Dan's example, that carrier had a million opportunities to back out and to say, you know what? Hey, cooler heads should be prevailing on this situation, and let's pull the freight guard down and move on. But they never did. It's crazy.
He did, and that was the very strange thing about this particular case. It's not like we filed the lawsuit on day 2. No,
right.
They got a cease and desist. They got phone calls. They had every opportunity, and even after the legal papers were filed, the opportunity was still there to pull down the freight guard and pay $10,000 to the carrier to reimburse their attorney fees instead of going all the way through judgment and
wow,
suffering. Yeah. But that's an extreme example. But I think that Cale brings up a really good point. And I represent carriers mostly, but I would be happy to share my wisdom with brokers as well. And the wisdom I would share is take these freight guards seriously, have a policy in place, make the decision that's informed and fully supported by documentation, because you want to have a plan in place if you get communication from an attorney representing the carrier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very valid point, Dan. And I want to touch on, an aspect that we kind of touched on earlier is kind of this like I wouldn't call it a scheme, but like this new kind of scheme we're seeing from both brokers and the carrier side, where we're seeing people do a pay to play kind of scheme to remove freight guards for a fee. I've seen it a lot more with the double broker side, where double brokers are obviously trying to get these removed without having any kind of issues. We've seen this a lot. There's a carrier going around right now with Alma Express, which is somehow having all these freight guards removed pretty quickly. What do you guys, Dan? What do you and Cale kind of seeing in this pay to play kind of aspect? When it comes to some of these freight guards.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean? Maybe give an example.
I have an example if you want.
Yeah,
sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, we literally just had one. I think it was this week, where something happens and the situation escalates. Carrier doesn't show up, no call, no show, something like that, and you're trying to reach out to the carrier, and then you start to have conversations. In this particular example, is like, hey, we might have to do a freight guard on this. And then all of a sudden the carrier's like, because a lot of times that's a double broker, they took your load and they were posting to trying to move it. And so, like, well, what's it going to take for you to not post that? Because it's going to damage my business. And they give you a sad story, which is a lot of times the honest ones, it's the truth, right? But you can tell that. But a lot of times it is the double brokers that like, hey, I'll give you $1,000 if you don't put that freight guard. And what's it going to take?
Yeah, and I have thoughts on both sides of that, because as I mentioned, the very first thing that I try to do in resolving freight guards is try to find a mediated solution. And if that solution involves compensating the broker for their damages, that's perfectly legitimate. The problem is when somebody is a double broker, which is illegal, and they're trying to pay you off basically to not out them. And that's something that raises a lot of red flags. It's not necessarily illegal for them to offer you money to not post the freight guard, but it is highly unethical. And I think you're well within your right to say, you know what, I'd rather just out you to the industry and keep a bad guy off the streets, so to speak.
I want to touch on something again, or touch on something a little bit different, because Cale, that's a very good aspect of it. But something else we're seeing in this pay to play example is these bad brokers leaving negative freight guards on good carriers. Say, I'll use Jason as an example. Leaving bad freight guards against Jason, saying, "Hey, he never showed up for my loads, blah, 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 blah." Then 30 minutes after they post them, they reach out to Jason and say, "Hey, Jason, we've posted 3 freight guards against you because, we think you're a bad actor in this industry. But Jason, there's a great way for you to have these freight guards removed. You can pay us $5,000 a piece and we'll remove all the freight guards so your business isn't impacted." Now, this is something I've seen on LinkedIn 4 or 5 different times over the past probably 6 months, where these double brokers are coming across, whether it's people who are calling them out, they're people who are saying, "Hey, we're not going to haul loads. We're finding out you're a double broker." And then they're freight guarding them, saying, "Hey, we're going to basically hold you hostage." What would you tell people who are kind of going through that kind of situation, Dan?
Yeah, I would tell them to read an article that I actually wrote about that. It's on my website. And it talks about this concept. It's called blackmail. Blackmail is usually the criminal term for this. It's called civil extortion.
We're not all lawyers here, Dan. We talk with pay to play, easy words that we can all. No, just kidding. No, but continue.
I'm just saying. Sometimes you hear the term blackmail. Sometimes you hear the term extortion. We're basically talking about the same thing here. Yeah. It's somebody trying to get money through, by threatening you with harm to your business. That's illegal. And the first thing that I would do actually is I would consider filing a police report, because this is a violation of criminal law in every single jurisdiction. The interesting thing additionally is if it implicates interstate commerce, which a lot of trucking does, that's a matter for the Department of Justice. The FBI could get involved. And this is quite serious. So the very first thing that I would do if I was trying to help somebody resolve this is I would contact the posting broker and say, "Look, first of all, we're going to report you to the local police authorities. Now you take these down, or else this will be also followed up by a civil lawsuit for extortion. And you're going to pay the money, and you're also going to be dealing with the police and possibly the FBI on this." Now, this is a very serious thing.
Now, my retort to that, Dan, is a lot of these bad actors are in other countries. They don't really care. Like, what is the recourse there? Where they may be sitting in a call center in a different country. It makes absolutely no difference to them if I make a police report, if I contact the FBI, if I do all these things. Am I just kind of SOL in this situation, or do I have to pay maybe $5,000 to get these removed?
Well, yeah, you're kind of in the same boat when somebody hits you with a ransomware attack and freezes your files, and you're in a situation, well, do I pay them? Do I not? And yeah, you're absolutely right, Thomas, that the American justice system has a limited reach, and the local authorities in a different country have other things going on. So you're not going to get a lot of recourse there. But it really brings up a good point that a lot of carriers should, and Cale does this, but a lot of carriers should understand that a freight guard is only part of the story. It's not a definitive answer. It's not absolute gospel. There's another side of the story a lot of the time. And I think that a lot of reputable brokers would give a carrier the chance to explain what's up with this freight guard. And I mean, if a carrier comes back and says, hey, look, I can show you the emails where they're extorting me. I mean, I don't think that should be a barrier to doing business. But unfortunately, I don't have a great solution.
Do you think in maybe those instances that maybe they should be reaching out to maybe just the, maybe a law firm such as yourself or in their local area that can reach out to maybe the platform Carrier 411 who can send all this info and say, hey, we're being targeted by this carrier, this is what's happening, blah, 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 to be able to try to have those maybe removed or at least, kind of have those looked at in a different light?
Yeah, for sure. And I think Carrier 411 as a platform would definitely have an interest in keeping their platform free from being a vehicle for extortion. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that that's something that's viable. I have not had personally any experience with successfully resolving such issues with Carrier 411, but I do know who their lawyer is, so I could get in touch with him if need be. But that's definitely something that should be solved at the platform level, and I really hope that Carrier 411 would be receptive.
No, for sure. Jason, I want to get your input here. So, being the carrier, what should brokers know as they're listening? As we're coming up on time here rather quickly. We'll have to do another episode because this hour flew by extremely quick. What can brokers know about, motor carriers and posting freight guards and what it really means to their operations if they're posting these kind of bullshit freight guards?
It's like, dude, what does the broker like need to know? Like how it affects the carrier you're talking about? I would say, dude, in general.
Yeah, like, as a broker, we don't necessarily see those effects, right? So we just we can type away, send the review, and then that's kind of our side is done, right? We've warned other brokers that Jason Putney at Downey Shipping they're 10 minutes late on 2 of my loads back to back, and now the industry needs to know. What do you tell brokers who leave those kind of reviews or just negative reviews in general that aren't, they're just bullshit?
I can't think of anything other than like kind of a sob story which I hate. I'll say it anyways. It's like if I'm talking to brokers, right?
Yeah.
Being a motor carrier is way harder than you think it is. It's way harder than you think it is, dude. So your like ability to tank somebody's business. You have that ability, dude. You're a 22-year-old kid, and this motor carrier's been struggling uphill, for 10 years to procure the 20 drivers and trucks that they have. Unbelievably difficult. And it's like, oh, they were late, and just type up this rate guard. I'm like, dog, you have no idea what it took, or what it takes to be a motor carrier, right? It's like being a freight broker on super hard mode. It's like you got to do all the coordinating of shipments. You got to get all the customers. You got to do all the same things that a freight broker does. There's no difference. Just on hard mode where you got to procure the equipment. You got to hire drivers. Unbelievably difficult to do this shit. And so I don't have, that's all I got, man. It's a damn, it's just a sob story, dude. And it's like, oh, it's so hard. Just please don't do it, but like, that's all I got, man. It's just like you making it that it doesn't need to be made any more difficult. I got DOT up my ass. It's break week, dude. Like it just doesn't need to be any harder than it is. And your ability to like very easily, you can super easily make it 10 times harder for me. And I don't need that, I don't need, as a carrier, dude, I don't need you to make it any harder, dude. I need the opposite, dude. And there's also there's no equivalent. There is no equivalent. Like a carrier can't make a broker's life hard. I mean, you can in terms of service failure, right? For sure you can. Like you can for not for very long, right? Like you can say that you're going to do something a few times, you get a few service failures, and you've made that broker's life more difficult, right? Yeah. But that's it. You snuff that out pretty quick. But there's nothing that a carrier could do that is the equivalent, right? Like somehow make the broker's life like way harder for the next like 4 to 6 months. There is no, exactly. I don't use the word fair anymore, but like it's not fair. You know what I mean? It's like it's not a yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I don't like my answer, but
there's no like broker 411 that shippers are checking every day to make sure that, hey, their brokers are staying in line with their carriers. And, you, Jason, can't leave a review to Cale and say that's really going to impact his business very much, right? But if Cale leaves you a freight guard, it can impact you a lot differently than your review to Cale.
I can leave a review on Truckstop. I can leave a review on DAT. I can leave a review on Google, right? I could leave a review on Glassdoor I can leave all the reviews, and they're not going to make a bit of difference. Dude, just go on DAT and type in JB Hunt and look at the 15,000 one-star reviews. It doesn't matter, dude. They're moving all the freight. Nobody cares, dude, that it sucks to work with JB Hunt. No offense, JB Hunt. I don't really mean that, but like it's 15,000 people on DAT do, they don't want to work with you or they had a horrible experience. It doesn't matter, right? Like 15,001 bad reviews is not gonna move the needle, right? So yeah, it's a weird, dude. It's a weird, the dynamic itself is weird. So this extra like layer, or like just the fact that like this platform is so ubiquitous, right? Everybody's using it and taking it real serious, like it's just a platform, dude. It's just a website. It's not the government. It's not like Safer, right? Like it's not the FMCSA, dude. It's not the FMCSA coming in, doing an investigation, shutting you down, or, and then you look up my CSA score and you see that the investigation's been done. There's, all kinds of red flags going on. It's not that, dude. It's just some website. And for some reason, it's like it's the Bible, like you can't like, dude, if it's in, I don't know, bro. I'm just rambling a little bit.
I think you said it well though. Yeah. No, you got the point across.
Cale, I got a question for Cale, actually.
Yeah, please.
Sure.
So what do you think about the impact of Carrier 411 right now? Do you think it's been lessening a little bit, maybe diluting by there? I know there's competitor websites out there. Is the presence of those websites sort of diluting the impact of Carrier 401, or do you see it as still kind of the gospel?
It's still pretty important. I would say, and I was going to add one thing to this is the market, where the market is really dictates the power of that freight guard report, right? Because if we were coming out of COVID when everything was crazy and I just needed a truck, people weren't taking stock in those freight guards, right? They were like, oh, that was 3 weeks ago. It was probably a mistake, right?
There's not double brokering in those 3 weeks. They're not doing that anymore.
So it's the mood of the market that really dictates the power of that freight guard, unfortunately. And right now, the market's tough, right? We're all trying to just figure out how to make things work, and right or wrong, when the market's like this, customers have a shorter leash. And so it's like everybody's just on edge. And if we all just kind of take a couple deep breaths once in a while and try to look at it holistically from everybody's view, we're all just trying to make a buck and do it, the honest ones anyway, right? We're all trying to make a buck and make a living and not make it harder, to Jason's point, for everybody else. Yeah. But the mood right now is freight's tight, and I'm gonna put a ton of stock in those freight guard reports.
Yeah,
guys,
that's a very good point.
Can I describe to you the freight guards that I got, and you guys could tell me if you would freight guard me or not?
Let's do it.
I'll just tell you the one that I admitted to and was legitimate. You guys tell me if you would also freight guard. It was we had booked a load. Showed up to the shipper on time, all good. The driver got pissed that other trucks were showing up after him and getting loaded before him, right? So he just left. That's it. Didn't update anybody until maybe like an hour after he left. He called me like an hour after he left. He's like, yeah, man, I left because all these trucks are coming in, getting loaded and whatever. So I just left. I was like, bro, did you like what? Did you tell anybody that you were going to leave or whatever? He's like, nah, man. fuck it. And that was the freight guard that I basically just apologized for and, said, coach the driver on, obviously. Is that a freight guard in you guys' books? Like, just basically showing up to a shipment and then leaving without telling anybody. Or you could say that the broker was updated probably an hour after the driver left. So is that a freight guard, or is a freight guard like kind of too much for something like that?
So I think we need more details. Like, was it like a 5 p.m. he left and they no more loading? Was it a first come first serve and he had did he have an appointment? And
I think it may have been Walmart. It was a morning appointment at, I'm pretty sure, Walmart. So it's minimum is rescheduled. He was on time, yeah.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. I mean,
I personally, I'm probably not going to freight guard in that situation, but I'm definitely going to be very upset and let Jason, that I'm upset and why this messed things up for me and my customer. But I'm not gonna. I personally, I'm not freight guarding in that situation.
Yeah,
right.
I think I'm pretty close to that alignment because, part of it is with a Walmart or somebody like that. If you miss that appointment, you're screwed. But is on time, and So yeah, I don't think I'd leave a freight guard on that. I mean, that's pretty ticky tacky in my opinion. It's frustrating, but this business is frustrating. Right. That's why we do it.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for your takes on that. It makes you feel worse because Yeah. Yeah.
I would, because I would say, look, you get paid to deliver the freight, and you delivered the freight, or you were there, but you didn't unload it, so you just left. I mean, you didn't fulfill the essential part of what we were paying you to do.
Walmart didn't.
Without cost. There was no good reason for it.
Walmart didn't.
No good reason.
Start unloading him at his appointment time, and they start unloading other trucks. I'm on no one's side, but hey, I'm also not on the receiver's side because they're a different animal.
Yep.
Well, I just thought this could benefit from a different conclusion, just for the sake of argument.
No, I love it. Let's finish with this. Jason, Kale, Dan, I appreciate you guys coming on. I think this has been a really fun conversation. We're gonna have you guys back soon because our hour flew by way too quick. Before we go, we'll go Jason, Kale, and then Dan. What are you guys most bullish about going into 2025? It's been a rough year, whether that's brokers, whether that's carriers. We've seen a lot of brokerage exits. We've seen a lot of carrier exits. We've seen a lot from both angles. But what are you guys most excited about going into the new year?
Yeah, trying to keep it, for the sake of keeping it positive.
Yeah.
Dude, just for positivity's sake, I'm excited about these miles, dude. We got miles in front of us, plenty of dude. There's no money happening, but there's a lot of miles happening, right? And that makes me happy, dude. I'm a truck driver. Truck drivers got to have their miles, right? Truck driver without their miles, it's not a happy truck driver, So we got, I'm looking forward to those miles coming up in 2025, dude. Those are definitely, those are going to be great, man. It's going to be great miles. We're doing a couple million miles a year, man. So I'm pumped on that. And hopefully we got, many, many millions more, afterwards. I have
some more profit in those miles too.
No, I lost hope. Money's long gone. Dude, I'm strictly focused on miles at this point, bro. That money is like
Jason's that meme. It's like, you guys are getting paid for this.
Yeah,
it is that way, dude.
Kale, what are you most bullish about for 2025?
I guess for our perspective is we've been doing a lot of stuff internally. So I'm just looking at it from a company perspective that we've added some key people on our team for recruiting. We have a lot of good conversations we're having with people joining the team, both on the agent side and employee, and developing more of a training program, because it's hard to get people to move as a freight broker, because if they're established, why are they going to move? It's like nobody's going to unless they're like throwing the kitchen sink at them for a year. But that's not our business model. Is that's kind of that pay to play model. We're going to pay fair, but we're not going to pay 85% for 2 years or whatever, because at the end of the day, if you did the math, you are not making money on that by the time you do it all. So I'm excited about what we're doing internally, building some sales programs, doing a lot of training, investing in that, and just putting it back in the business so that when it does take off, whether that's mid 25 or 26, we'll be ready to launch.
That's let's hope that it's before mid 25 for everyone listening out there.
Yeah,
none of us have a crystal ball, but yeah, it's kind of what it's shaping up to be at the latest. Dan, what are you most bullish on for 2025?
I'm really excited that Artaev at Law has a transportation law division now. Who would have thought that 4 years ago when I wrote that article about freight guards, I'd be on a podcast and I'd have a transportation law division catering to the various needs of trucking companies. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm also excited to be working with companies like Carrier Defender and really thinking outside the box to craft these effective real world solutions to real problems that guys like Jason and guys like Kale are facing day to day. Because at the end of the day, it's really frustrating for me as an attorney to hear stories like, oh, I called up this attorney and he wanted $1,000 to even talk to me. And then when I paid him, he didn't even know what a freight guard was. That's really frustrating to me. I'm all about, results and the realities and keeping trucks moving and, the business. Everybody makes money. Everybody can win at the end. So I'm really excited to be a part of this industry.
I love it. Dan, welcome to the industry. We appreciate what you're doing. We appreciate having you here. Gentlemen, it was really fun having you guys here. I want to thank you guys again for coming on, sharing your stories, sharing a little bit more about freight guards and how they impact every aspect of the industry. If our audience wants to get in touch with you guys, I'll make sure to leave all your links, whether that's LinkedIn, Twitter. I'll make sure to get everyone's where they're most active. So if anyone wants to get in touch with you guys, if they want to learn more, they can. If you guys like today's show, make sure you give it a like and review. It helps us out a ton. We do drop newsletters 3 times a week. ThinkFreight.io, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We'll catch you guys in the next episode. Don't forget to think freight.